Welcome to Between Authors. I am your host, author Adrian Lopez. What is it that excites us as a reader? It's finding that author or book that you may never have heard of, sort of like the treasure hunt for a reader. The goal from my podcast is to bring to you either those authors or those books that you may never have found, but may be the treasure you've been hunting for all along. Today in episode 55, I bring to you author Victoria Moxley. We're going to go over a little bit about who she is, what she's published, what she's working on, and maybe what her plans are for the future. Welcome to the show, Victoria.
Thank you. I'm so excited for this.
Me as well. I'm happy you're here today. We are pre-recording this, but I know it's either your birthday today or coming up.
It's my birthday today, so I brought the birthday shark.
There you go. Happy birthday today. Happy birthday for that. I'll definitely post something tonight to make sure I get that out there for you as well.
Oh, thank you.
Why don't you begin by giving an introduction to you to the viewers?
Well, I'm Victoria Moxley. I'm from Texas. I am a Latinx. Oh, sorry, my shark hit the camera. But I'm a Latinx or Latina author. I'm indie. I'm going to do hybrid indie publishing and self-publishing. And I am neurodivergent and pan. So I tick all the boxes for, being an author out there. I have one book out currently, and I have about 4 more in the works for this year, hopefully.
Okay. Why don't you also let the viewers know what influences you? And remember, it doesn't necessarily have to be authors or books.
I mean, a lot of the paranormal and fantasy romances that I grew up reading for the last 20 years definitely influenced me. I think a lot of the shows that I watch have influenced me, like Sons of Anarchy and things like that. the nitty gritty stuff, and horror movies for sure. I like to get my gruesomeness from the horror movies.
Yep, my favorite as well. So
There we go.
I just lost the question I had for you too a second ago.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. It kind of went right on. I was like, oh, that's the perfect question to ask, and it just kind of went right on to the thing. What currently is the genre you write in, or would you say you're in a certain genre, or are you going to be kind of hopping around?
I feel like all of my books are going to basically be romances that are either dark or have dark themes, but I bounce around what other, like this one is modern kind of fantasy-ish because it's modern myths.
Mhm.
I have one that's full fantasy that I'm working on. I have one that's paranormal that I'm working on. So I hop around, but it all is like dark romance.
Okay. So let's begin. Why don't you give the viewers the name of your book and give us like a quick synopsis or summary of it?
So my first book, my debut novel is The Trials of Aphrodite. It's the first Misaligned Myths book. We meet Aphrodite after she's already gone on a journey of self-discovery, and she realizes what she's been missing, and that the love she thought was hers, it was toxic, it wasn't good for her, and she's decided to reconcile with her husband. And she doesn't know how to contact him. She's been MIA for a decade working on herself, and so she goes to Hera, and Hera says she won't let Deity anywhere near Hephaestus until she agrees to undergo some very gruesome trials.
Okay.
So that is how she gets a message to Hephaestus, and then when he agrees that yes, he'll let her prove herself, then the trials begin. But in that time, she does get to spend time with him and reconnect and realize what she was missing all along.
Was this a story that you had thought about for a long time, or something, or how did it kind of come about? Because it's always different for everybody.
It definitely is one I've been thinking about for a few years. I have always written Aphrodite for the last 7 or 8 years. I went and joined an online magazine where people write as different gods, and I wrote as Aphrodite. She ended up being the one that I got. And the story kind of helped be developed by the Hephaestus that was there, but we had completely different visions. And this was a story that I wanted to tell that I knew wasn't one that worked there. And I was like, okay, you know what? I'm just going to write it into a book. I want her to go through these trials. And then
Okay.
I realized I had so many other gods that I've written over the years that fit into the same universe that I was like, oh, I can just turn this into a whole series and like unleash them all in the world.
What do you have an idea right now, how big the series is going to be? And I know that's always kind of in pencil because that can change as you're doing it.
Right now, for the definite future, I have about 5 or 6. Ultimately, I have about 20 planned because I go into other pantheons, which I do introduce another pantheon in this one. But I wanted to get all the Greek gods out of the way for the most part and then go into the other pantheons as well.
Okay. And are you planning on, do you have it kind of planned out how you want to do it? Is like one a year? Do you have a kind of an idea how you want to,
I
release
would
them?
like at least one a year, but ultimately, I think I want to get it up to 2 or 3 a year. Right now, I'm just looking at one.
Okay. So for the book, is there a favorite scene in that book that you either the scene itself or how it came together?
I do have a favorite scene. I actually sent it to a narrator when she wanted clips and had her narrate it, so just so I could hear it. I loved it so much. It's the one I send to everybody. It's right after she is done with the first trial. She's been healed because she was bloody and poisoned. Well, she had venom in her. And she throws a certain appendage at Hera's feet and tells her, that is so you can go F yourself, my queen.
How did it come out on the narration?
It was beautiful. Oh my God,
Really?
I was laughing. I listened to it and I still laugh every single time. I loved it so much.
I think I missed that. I don't remember seeing that on your page if you posted it. I have to go back and look.
I'll send it to you.
Okay, perfect. On the opposite end of that, you always like to ask, was there a hard scene in the book?
Oh gosh. There was a very hard scene that one of my friends had to do what we at that online magazine I was talking about, we call it the wet daddy method because there were two authors that wrote Poseidon. So it became the wet daddy method to collaborate on one character. And I had trouble with the first scene that Hephaestus is in, the reconciliation scene, because I hadn't gotten a feel for him. I had never
Yeah,
written him before. And he later became what I wanted him to be, but he was hard that first time.
yeah, I could see that. Um, a question is a little separate from the book is I know, like, again, you're a big horror fan, right? Which so am I. Do you find yourself having aspects of horror in your stories, or is there anything influenced by horror that you've felt or you've noticed has kind of come into your writing?
I felt like this being my first book, I went a little easy on the gore and horror. I know the next one I'm not going to be as gentle. Um, but I do feel like that's where I get a lot of I need blood in this, or in this case, Icar, but I need there to be bloodshed. I need the
Yeah,
goriness, because my favorite horror movies are all extremely gory.
yeah, yeah. I mean that was I did kind of the same thing. And the werewolf one is I didn't want to go too crazy. I was like, let me just kind of get it just what you need to explain what's going on and what's happening, but not go too overboard. And there was a couple of reviewers that read it and they liked it, but their audience was more in the extreme graphic, and they're like, I liked your book, but I don't really want to put it up there because they may give you bad reviews because they like it really over the edge, which I understood completely. But yeah, I kind of did the same thing, kind of ease it in, and then I think the zombie book is going to have a lot more. So you kind of start letting your horror background kick in after.
Oh yeah.
So I know again you've mentioned that you were writing, a lot of these gods and Aphrodite in that club or magazine or the other part that you're doing it in. Outside of that, what kind of research did you do for this book or for your series storyline in general?
So for this one, I did research some of the more obscure myths. I was searching for little tidbits I could put in that a lot of people forget. Like, I do touch on a lot of the fact that Aphrodite originally was a war goddess before she was the love goddess, and I do put a lot of that in. But on the on the other end of that, I did change some of the mythology. I did change the world, which I touched on a little bit in this book. And it's very obvious because I made what is called a deathless season. Tartarus is closed when Persephone goes to Hades. So no one dies during that time. And I'll touch on it more in the next one, like the differences between the myths of my world and the current world, which is where the misaligned myths comes from.
Okay. Did you do a lot of like world building for this in terms of the difference or the separation, or was it more, just altering some things and some changes?
I feel like the world building wasn't done during my process of writing this. It was done in the years of writing these characters with my friends and other random strangers I'd written with on the internet before. The whole world was built by the time I came up with this story and said, you know what, let me push these things together. I was starting to say put and push, but let me put them together. I'm a little tongue tied. I'm sorry.
No worries, but you're doing great. I usually ask this question, but technically I know the answer for you. So I usually like to ask, when you have done a world building, do you plan on using it going forward? I know you do because you're doing a whole series of these, right? But I usually always ask the question because when you put that much work into doing that, kind of like the Star Wars universe or the Marvel universe, you can have all these different storylines and just use that world that you created, right? So, but I know that you're technically doing that with a series. In
Yeah.
in the storyline with all the different gods you're going to touch on, are you kind of staying to who they are or who everybody knows, or are you taking some changes or altering some things?
A
Because
little of both.
little both, okay.
Because this is them in the modern world. So it's not like this is them in the myth. This is, okay, it's been thousands of years. This is the modern world. So how have they adapted? How are they in the human world? Like Nyx, everybody's like, oh my God, Nyx is out of her realm because she's literally just hidden in her shadow realm for this entire time. She hasn't come to the modern world. And her book is literally her getting this human companion who is going to help her ease into the human world because she's not been in the modern world.
That sounds pretty
Which
good.
she's not Nyx.
So outside of that, did you do any other research for the series other than, like, again, all the stuff you have been doing and the other writings and such?
Specifically for this series, I've only been because I know the basic myths of
Yeah.
all the gods that I've been working on or working with in this series so far. So the only thing I've really done is try to find the more obscure for all of them, really, and piece those into the basic plots I have for each of their books coming up, which I do know who's next. I have decided finally.
Okay. Do you are you- will you write a god into this that maybe is not part of the original, lore or folklore? Do you find yourself thinking at some point you may do your own character or put your own character in it?
I've put a lot of my own humans into it. I also put a demon into it. As far as gods, I'm not sure yet. I haven't gotten to a point where I need to do that. I think there might be one where I might have to, but so far, no. I've liked using the gods and like matching these gods people either know or are now going to learn about and putting them together like unlikely friendships
Hmm.
just to create something different.
So I know you're working on book two, or are you starting book two, or are you on book two right now?
Technically, I have started it.
Okay. And again, I don't want you to share anything more than you want to, but is there anything in terms of that you would like to share about it, or maybe a direction? But again, whatever you're comfortable with.
Book two is going to be Hera's love story, and it is not with Zeus, of course. You know, that is not, again, it's toxic relationship we're going to get away from. We
Yes.
want toxic relationships that are okay. You will get a little bit of what her side of some of the scenes in Aphrodite were for the first few chapters, and then it's just completely going off to her love story and touching a
Okay.
lot on how I've changed the myths.
Okay. Now, you mentioned a little bit about in the beginning how you're kind of right now in the Greek mythology, right? And you're going to start touching on other ones. Have you kind of planned or you have an idea what other ones you're going to touch on?
So I've introduced an Aztec goddess as Aphrodite's best friend. So we already have Aztec. I think I have a Mayan one planned down the line. I do have some Norse and Egyptian, and I keep forgetting how, I guess it is Scandinavian, how Chernabog is considered, because Chernabog
Okay.
will get his own as well.
Okay. Um, so you're writing all these books, right? So say right now you said that you kind of have an idea of 20, right? Say you've written all 20, right? You start kicking them out, and in 7 years you got the whole 20 books released, right? The whole collection. Do you have plans of something outside of that that you'd like to do? Which I'm sure you do. And that's one part of the question. Another part of the question is, do you see yourself maybe doing, I don't like to use the term spin-off, but maybe other either short story works or things that come off of your books?
I actually have spin-offs planned because I keep talking about the Afterlife Hub. And while I was talking about the Afterlife Hub in this one, I started thinking about all the stories of the people in different departments in the afterlife, trying to make make everything work. So yes, I do actually have spin-offs planned, and I'm working on some novellas, a duology, and I have other series planned.
Okay, perfect. Will the spin-offs be full novels, or do you think there'll be more novellas or short story collections, or how do you think you may approach it?
Right now, for the moment, I'm thinking full-length novel, maybe not like super long, but like a normal like 40 to 50,000 word novel. But that's at least the first one that I was thinking of doing. I don't know about the rest going forward.
Okay. So, another question I always like to ask is technically it's like a bucket list question, right? And it's kind of couple parts to it. One of the parts would be, you have a whole series plan that's kind of like you said, kind of in that roughly same genre. You have some paranormal coming at you. We'll start bringing some horror into it, and most works are multiple genres anyway, right? You touch upon a bunch of different things when you're writing a story. It's very very rare. It's just one genre that something falls in. But is there something maybe that you love, right? Maybe you love reading or you enjoy that at some point you go, I really want to tackle this, and it's not quite what I'm writing now, but something I really do want to attempt.
I think because I get in my moods where I want to read high fantasy that does have romance elements. And I think at some point that is something I'd like to try and do because, like I said, a lot of what I'm doing right now, it's more modern or paranormal. And I do have a fantasy, but it's not high fantasy. It's humans, like mortals.
Would that one have world building as well, or would you try to take that more modern times or modern cultures?
If I did high fantasy or
No, like you said, you want to do high fantasy, but you do have kind of a fantasy planned in there.
it- it's it's not a modern world. It's kind of ambiguous. It is a world I built because I created the gods for it, the countries. The only like elements of magic are the fact that there are gods, and the main male character is a barbarian demigod king that the sacrificial princess marries to win his father's favor for her country. Like
Okay.
everyone else is mortal.
So, again, that's part one of the question. So the other part would be, is there a storyline or is there something, you know, in your career as a writer that you want to attempt? And, I asked this question because, there's some authors I've talked to that, the story that they wrote was something they used to dream about in high school or they thought about since they were kids, but they realized that they didn't write it till much later because it never would have worked earlier, right? They kind of needed that life experience or the trials and tribulations of being a writer, going through it to do that. Is there something that maybe you've thought about that? Look, I really want to do this at some point, but maybe it's not the right time, and maybe not the right time just means I need to get through my entire collection of stories right now.
Yeah. Well, there was a zombie apocalypse with a different it was a different kind of zombie apocalypse than we normally see that I wanted to do. I did want it to be a series as well, although I don't know now if I want to do a full series. But it just wasn't something I could write when I tried to sit down and write it every single time.
Yeah. Would that
I
one
would
be would that one be much heavier probably on the horror side, or again I appreciate when it comes from a different angle. So or are you gonna try to take it maybe a different approach?
I definitely want to make it more heavy emotionally and the horror as the horror aspect. I do not want to pull any punches when it comes to how gory a zombie apocalypse can be, how disgusting and filthy. Um, I don't know how much of the romance I would leave in it because originally I had planned on having, plenty of that. It's changed the older I get. It's one I've been thinking about for a while and it's changed so
Yeah.
much.
And really, again, that's why I asked that question because it does, right? It's interesting how it does change as you grow, right? As you mature, or as you go through other things in life, and as you write and it really does sometimes change. So that's really why I like asking that question to see if there's something that there's there, but you're like, I just can't do it yet. In
No, that's a
terms
really good
of
question.
horror, right? We touched a little bit, and again, I just love talking about this. That's why I'm asking the question. Um, what is your favorite genre in terms of horror, and is it just movies for you, or have you also, been reading in that genre as well?
I mean, I've read some horror, like I've read, Stephen King and Poe, of course. I have, I think, some of the R.L. Stein that's not for kids. And unfortunately, every time I pick up horror off of Book Talk, it ends up being splatterpunk. And it's not exactly what I was looking for, going
Yeah,
in. I was like, I want to be scared. So a lot of my horror does just come from movies.
yeah. Do you have a favorite? Do you have a favorite series or movie or
I'm a big
genre of horror?
Hellraiser fan.
Yeah,
Big
Hellraiser is
Hellraiser.
amazing.
And every
Yeah.
Valentine's Day, I do a Saw marathon.
Oh, really?
Mhm.
Did you read Barker's stuff for Hellraiser,
They're
or just more the movie side?
the books of blood, they're on my wish list. So I want to read them. I haven't read them yet.
Okay. Well, it is your birthday today, so hopefully maybe somebody will get out there and start taking stuff off your wish list.
Oh, my friends have, but nobody got me those. That's
So,
okay.
I'm glad you touched a little bit early on about the Latinx, right? Because I've been trying to do that with Bonita, and it's really very interesting because you don't see a lot of us in the For You page. You don't see a lot of us really in the algorithm, and we're there, right? Our voice is there and our work is there, but you don't see it a lot, right? And that's kind of what we wanted to do, was to get all of us out there, get us in the algorithm, get us on that For You page. And even technically, if we're not writing Latinx stories, right, Latinx works, we do want to make sure that people understand our voice is out there, right? Because it's very interesting. There's another author that every once in a while he posts, like, the authors of certain genres, right? And basically, for horror, there is a lot more Latinx authors, but really, when you went down every genre, it's really there's like hardly any percentages that you see. And I don't know if that's the case. I just may think that we're just not getting seen, or we're just not known out there, right? So
I feel like the
it's a good
popularity is
thing
not
for
there.
us to try to get ourselves out there and try to get our work seen more, right? And it's something hopefully I want to keep doing, especially get your work out there. Um, you did send me your book. I will read it. I've been stuck with the zombie thing to make sure I get that done and out. So as soon as I start handing it off to all the beta readers, which you're one of, then I can start digging into your book and reading that as well. But yeah, I'm happy you're part of that Latinx thing because I really do want to get all of us out there, right? Just get our voice
Yeah.
heard and seen.
Don't worry though, I haven't read yours either yet. I've been in a little bit of a reading slump.
It's interesting because one of the things as an indie author is really time, right? You don't have a lot of time because generally we all work. We do this on the side. We're writing, right, or editing or doing something. So it's the one thing that suffers the most for all of us is just being able
Is
to
reading.
read.
This is my TBR jar. It's getting up there.
Yeah, I know. Uh, but yeah, it is interesting because again, it's something I would like to do more to be able to support all you guys, but it's hard. It's very difficult to be able to find the time to really sit down and read everything you want to read or get to everybody's work that you want to support and leave reviews or whatever for each author.
Yep.
I definitely want to thank you for coming on today, Victoria. When your next book is ready, when it gets close, I want to bring you on again so we can talk about that and start talking about the series a little more. Happy birthday again.
Thank
Hope you're
you.
having a great day and you have a great rest of the night. I want to let the viewers remind them that I will leave down below all the links for Victoria, links for the book, links for websites, socials, whatever she wants to share on that side. I will definitely, there they are. I will definitely, post everything on that side for her. There will be also, so you guys can see it, I will leave the copies of the covers on the screen so you get a good image of what the covers look like as well. And, if you have a comment for either Victoria or myself, definitely leave it below. And, if you have a question about the podcast, about our works or anything, we'd love to see that and give you guys an answer. I really appreciate you coming on today, Victoria, and talking about your book and your work.
I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And viewers, again, thank you for watching. Goodbye.